The system is designed to crush you. When 19-year-old Liam Dawson stood before the Honorable Judge Annette Pierce, he was just another statistic. A black kid in a borrowed suit, facing felony charges, and a slick prosecutor. The judge rolled her eyes. She called his desperate plea a fishing expedition and dismissed him with a bang of her gavel. But she made one fatal mistake. She assumed he was stupid. She had no idea that Liam had a secret, a mind that had memorized the very laws she swore to uphold. And he was about to use those laws to expose a conspiracy that would cost the judge not just her robe, but her entire life. Courtroom 3B of the county courthouse was not a hall of justice. It was a human processing plant. The air was thick with the smell of stale coffee, cheap polyester, and quiet desperation. The ancient air-conditioning unit groaned in the corner, losing its battle against the late-morning heat and the sheer number of bodies packed onto the hard wooden benches. At the front, elevated above everyone, sat the Honorable Judge Annette Pierce. Judge Pierce was a woman who had mistaken her position for a divine right. In her 20 years on the bench, her name had become a terror to public defenders and a rubber stamp for the DA's office. She was known for her efficiency, which was a polite term for her profound impatience. She saw her courtroom as her domain, and the defendants who paraded before her were, in her mind, simply disruptions to her schedule. On this day, her docket was long, and her patience was already thin. "Next case," she barked, not looking up from the file in front of her. "The People versus Liam Dawson. File 25889B. A ripple of movement. A young man stood up from the defendant's table. This was Liam Dawson. To Judge Pierce, he was a stereotype. 19 years old, though he looked younger. Black. He was wearing a suit, but it was laughably ill-fitting. A charcoal grey jacket that was 2 sizes too big, the sleeves hanging past his knuckles, and slacks that bunched at his ankles. It was the only suit his mother owned, his late father's. Beside him, his court-appointed public defender, a man named Mr. Hodge, shuffled his papers with a sigh of resignation. Hodge was a man beaten down by the system he was paid to be part of. He knew the game. Plead out, cut the losses, move to the next file. "Mr. Dawson," Judge Pierce said, finally glancing up. Her eyes, cold and grey, scanned him with immediate disdain. "You are charged with 1 count of felony possession of stolen property, specifically high-value microprocessors. How do you plead?" Mr. Hodge leaned toward the microphone. "Your Honor, my client, we are still in discussions, but we are prepared to—" "I am not speaking to you, Mr. Hodge," Pierce snapped. "I am speaking to the defendant, Mr. Dawson." Liam Dawson stepped forward, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of the table. His voice was soft, and he had to clear his throat. "Your Honor—" "Speak up, son," Pierce sighed, her eyes drifting to the clock. "Your Honor," Liam said, his voice gaining a sudden, unexpected firmness. "I wish to dismiss counsel and proceed pro se." The entire courtroom went silent. Even the groaning AC unit seemed to hold its breath. Mr. Hodge looked at Liam as if he had just sprouted a second head. "Liam, what are you doing?" he hissed. Judge Pierce's eyes narrowed. This was an inconvenience. A pro-se defendant, especially one this young, meant an afternoon wasted on procedural nonsense. "Mr. Dawson," she said, her voice dripping with artificial patience, "you understand that representing yourself in a felony case is unwise? You are facing a mandatory minimum of 3 years. Mr. Hodge is a competent attorney. He's a competent attorney who has advised me to plead guilty to a crime I didn't commit," Liam said, his voice ringing with a clarity that surprised everyone, including himself. "I understand my rights under Ferretta versus California. I knowingly and intelligently waive my right to counsel." I wish to represent myself." The judge stared at him. He had just cited Ferretta. She felt a small, hot prickle of annoyance. A jailhouse lawyer. The worst kind. "Very well," she said, a new, sharper edge to her voice. "Your request is granted. Mr. Hodge, you are dismissed. Good luck, Mr. Dawson." The good luck sounded like a curse. On the other side of the room, the prosecutor, Assistant District Attorney Arnold Strickland, flashed a predatory grin. He was a man in a $1,000 suit with a shark's ambition. A pro C kid? This was a gift. He wouldn't even have to break a sweat. "Mr. Dawson," Judge Pierce continued, "let's try this again. The state has charged you with felony possession. How do you plead?" Liam took a deep breath. His hands were trembling, but he locked his eyes on the judge. "Your Honor, I plead not guilty, and before the prosecution proceeds, I have a pre-trial motion I would like to file with the court." Strickland actually laughed, a short, barking sound he covered with a cough. Judge Pierce pinched the bridge of her nose. "A motion? Of course you do. What motion, Mr. Dawson?" Liam reached into a worn backpack at his feet, a backpack that looked suspiciously like the one listed in the evidence report, and pulled out a stack of papers. They were neatly typed. "I move to dismiss all charges against me, with prejudice, on the basis of gross prosecutorial misconduct, multiple constitutional rights violations, and the presentation of evidence known to be falsified." The smirk vanished from Strickland's face. He shot to his feet. "Objection! Your Honor, this is absurd. The defendant is just flailing. He's wasting the court's time." Judge Pierce looked at Liam, her face a mask of cold fury. This boy was not just an inconvenience. He was being insolent. "Mr. Dawson," she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous low, "you are making an extremely serious accusation, one that could land you in contempt. You accuse the DA's office of misconduct? On what possible grounds could you, a layman, have for such a claim?" Liam laid the papers on the table. "My motion is twofold, Your Honor. The first part pertains to a Brady violation." Judge Pierce leaned back, crossing her arms. "A Brady violation. My. We have been studying. Did you find that in a copy of Black's Law Dictionary in the prison library?" The few sycophants in the gallery chuckled. Liam's face flushed, but he held her gaze. "Yes, Your Honor, I did. Along with the state's own Code of Criminal Procedure." He tapped the first page. "The prosecution, led by Mr. Strickland, has willfully and knowingly withheld exculpatory evidence favorable to my defense, a direct violation of my due process rights as established in Brady v. Maryland." "That is a lie!" Strickland shouted. "We have provided the defense with all standard discovery. Mr. Hodge had it for weeks." "You provided Mr. Hodge," Liam said, his voice cutting through the ADA. "It's bluster. With a 1-minute and 32-second clip from the arresting officer's body camera. You also provided a property log for the evidence, Exhibit 4A, the microprocessors." "That is the relevant footage," Strickland retorted. "It shows the defendant in possession of the stolen goods." "It shows part of the arrest," Liam corrected. "But the arrest report, filed by Officer Daniel Kopetsky, states the interaction, from first contact to my placement in the squad car, lasted 14 minutes. I am requesting the full, unedited, 14-minute footage, as well as the unedited footage from his partner, Officer Miller." Judge Pierce held up a hand. "Mr. Dawson, this is a classic fishing expedition. The prosecution has provided the relevant portion. The missing 12 minutes are likely just you being read your rights and standard processing. What do you imagine this missing footage will show?" Liam looked her square in the eye. "It will show me repeatedly telling Officer Kopetsky that the backpack was not mine. It will show me telling him, who gave me the backpack, seconds before he placed it on my back and activated his camera. Strickland was pale. Judge Pierce, however, was unmoved. So you say, you're claiming a frame-up, a bold claim from someone found holding the bag. You have no basis for this motion, Mr. Dawson. It's conjecture. Then my second point is not conjecture, Liam said, his voice dropping. It's math, and it's perjury. He slid the second paper to the front. This is the evidence chain of custody log for Exhibit 4A, the stolen chips. It was signed by Officer Kopetsky, who states he logged the evidence at the downtown precinct at 8:14 p.m. on the night of my arrest. And, Pierce prompted, her impatience boiling over. And this, Liam said, sliding over another paper, is the GPS log from Officer Kopetsky's squad car, which I was forced to subpoena from the city's fleet management database using my own funds. He pointed to a line item. At 8:14 p.m., Officer Kopetsky's vehicle was not at the precinct. It was parked on the 300 block of West Heron Street, 6 miles away, for 22 minutes. He wasn't logging evidence, Your Honor. He was meeting someone. A wave of murmurs swept the courtroom. Judge Pierce banged her gavel. Silence! She looked at the paper, then at Strickland. The prosecutor looked ill. It's a clerical error, Strickland sputtered. The time, he probably logged it later and backdated it. It's sloppy, but it's not perjury. It's not a clerical error, Liam insisted, because the log wasn't signed by Officer Kopetsky. He was sloppy. The evidence log was actually signed in at the desk by the evidence technician on duty. Judge Pierce glanced down at the log. It says B. Wells. Yes, Your Honor, Liam said, his voice soft. B. Wells. Brendan Wells, the evidence technician. Liam paused, then delivered the blow. Who, according to the DA, as office visitor logs, which I also subpoenaed, had a private, off-the-record lunch meeting with ADA Strickland the day before my arrest, the same day the microprocessors were stolen. The courtroom was so quiet, the hum of the fluorescent lights sounded like a roar. Strickland's face had gone from pale to a sickly, greenish white. Judge Annette Pierce stared at the name B. Wells. She knew that name. Of course she knew that name. Brendan Wells was a new hire in the evidence room, a new hire she herself had recommended, a favor for a family friend. No, not a family friend. Brendan Wells was her sister's son, her nephew. Her eyes shot up, moving from Strickland's panicked face to the steady, accusing gaze of the young black man at the podium. This wasn't a fishing expedition. It was a torpedo, and in her arrogance, she had sailed right into it. She felt a sudden, cold dread. This wasn't just about her nephew. It was about her reputation, her career. Mr. Dawson, she said, her voice a strained, brittle thing. You are making accusations of conspiracy. I'm stating facts, Your Honor, Liam said. The Brady violation I mentioned. It's not just the footage. The real withheld evidence is the relationship between Mr. Strickland and Mr. Wells, a relationship the prosecution has a duty to disclose as it pertains to the credibility of the state's entire chain of evidence. Judge Pierce looked at Strickland. The shark was now a beached fish, gills flapping uselessly. Mr. Strickland, she demanded, is this true? Did you meet with Mr. Wells? It was just lunch, Your Honor, Strickland stammered. A friendly, I was welcoming him to the department. And Officer Kopetsky's GPS log, she pressed. I can't speak for the officer's movements. Judge Pierce knew she was cornered. To grant the motion would be to admit her own nephew was part of a criminal conspiracy. To deny it, she looked at Liam Dawson. He was just a kid, a poor black kid from the bad side of town. Who would believe him over her and a DA. She had built her career on this calculation. "Mr. Dawson," she said, her voice hardening, "you have presented a series of interesting coincidences. But you have not provided proof of misconduct. You have provided a lunch receipt and a GPS anomaly. That is not grounds for a dismissal." She raised her gavel. "Your motion to dismiss is denied." She banged the gavel hard, the sound a crack of thunder in the tense room. "This court will not be held hostage by the wild-eyed fantasies of a pro-se defendant. We will proceed to trial." She looked at Liam, a look of triumphant dismissal. "Do you have anything else, Mr. Dawson? Or are you ready to be quiet?" The gallery sighed, a mix of disappointment and resignation. The show was over. The kid had tried, but the house always wins. Liam Dawson did not sit down. He did not look defeated. He looked calm. He took a slow breath. "Yes, Your Honor. I do have something else." He reached into his backpack one more time. "I'd like to talk about the Miranda waiver I supposedly signed." Annetta Pierce felt a migraine bloom behind her right eye. This was preposterous. The day, which should have been a simple conveyor belt of guilty pleas, had derailed completely. "The Miranda waiver?" she repeated, her voice laced with acid. "Are you now claiming you were not read your rights? We have a signed document. I have it right here in your file." She fanned the pages, pulling one out. A waiver, signed Liam Dawson. "Do you deny this is your signature?" "No, Your Honor. That's my signature," Liam said evenly. "Then what is the issue?" she snapped. "The issue," Liam said, "is when I signed it. Officer Kopecky claims in his report that I signed this waiver in the interrogation room at the precinct at 9:30 p.m., after I had been read my rights and before I was questioned. That is standard procedure," Judge Pierce said. "Yes, it is," Liam agreed. "But I didn't sign it at 9:30 p.m. I signed it at 7:45 p.m. in the back of his squad car before I was ever read my rights." Strickland, who had regained a small sliver of his composure, pounced. "Your Honor, that is a he said, she said argument. The defendant has no proof of this. It's a desperate lie. It wouldn't be he said, she said, if the prosecution hadn't provided an edited body cam clip," Liam shot back, his voice rising for the first time. "But I don't need the body cam. I have Officer Kopetsky's own sloppiness." He held up a new document. "This is the request for interrogation room form for that night. It's an internal police document. I had to file 3 separate information requests to get it." He placed it on the overhead projector. The courtroom watched as the image appeared on the wall screen. Officer Kopetsky and his partner, Officer Miller, requested interrogation room 2 at 9:15 p.m., Liam explained, his finger tracing the text. "The form was approved at 9:18 p.m. They logged me, the suspect, as entering the room at 9:22 p.m., and the interrogation, according to their own notes, began at 9:30 p.m. He looked at the judge. "The state's entire timeline hinges on me signing that waiver at 9:30 p.m. at the start of the interview." "Your point, Mr. Dawson?" Pierce demanded. "My point, Your Honor, is the waiver itself." He pulled the document from her file, an act of procedural confidence that stunned the court, and placed it on the projector. "Please read the time written on the document, next to my signature." Judge Pierce squinted. Strickland leaned in. It was there, in blue ink, in what was clearly Officer Kopetsky's handwriting. Time, 1946. A collective gasp. 1946, Liam said, his voice echoing in the silence. "That's 7:46 p.m., in a 24-hour clock, more than an hour before I was even booked into the precinct. Exactly when I said I signed it, in the back of his car, when he told me if I just signed the boring paperwork, things would go easier. Strickland was dumbfounded. He grabbed the file, shuffling papers, looking for an explanation. It's another clerical error. He meant 2146, not 1946. He wrote 1946, Mr. Strickland, Liam said. And per Miranda vs. Arizona, any confession or statement obtained as a result of a custodial interrogation before the suspect has been advised of their rights is inadmissible. Per Missouri vs. Cited, the practice of question first, warn later is unconstitutional. He turned to the judge. My interrogation, Your Honor, lasted 2 hours. I was exhausted. I was 18 years old. I had a forged waiver, and I was being lied to. I repeatedly asked for a lawyer. I was denied. Judge Pierce was at a loss. The evidence was irrefutable. It was right there, in a cop's own handwriting. A rookie mistake. But Kopetsky wasn't a rookie. This, she said, trying to regain control, is a matter for a suppression hearing. It does not warrant a full dismissal. It does, Liam insisted. When coupled with the rest of my motion, the Brady violation, the chain of custody fraud, the conspiracy, the entire case is fruit of the poisonous tree. He wasn't just a jailhouse lawyer. He was good. Judge Pierce looked at the document. 1946. She looked at her nephew's name on the other log. B. Wells. She looked at Strickland, who was visibly sweating through his expensive shirt. She was trapped. The case was poisoned, and she knew it. But her nephew, she made a decision. A terrible, career-ending decision. She would try to save her family. Mr. Dawson, she said, her voice a low, terrifying monotone. You have brought up one procedural error on a waiver form, a typo. You have not proven that Officer Kopecky's GPS log is anything but another typo, and you have not proven that a harmless lunch between colleagues is a conspiracy. She was stonewalling. She was using the power of her bench to deny the reality he had presented. Therefore, she continued, I am denying your motion to suppress the confession, pending a full evidentiary hearing, and I am still denying your motion to dismiss. This court finds you are... She paused, searching for the most painful word. Agrieved, perhaps, but your claims do not meet the high bar for dismissal, not when the officers found you with the stolen goods. She was ignoring the chain of custody. She was ignoring the Miranda violation. She was ignoring the Brady violation. She was dismissing his entire plea. Now, she thundered, for the last time, Mr. Dawson, are you prepared to proceed, or are you going to continue with this performance? Liam Dawson looked at her. The full, awesome and corrupt power of the state was bearing down on him, personified by this woman in a black robe. He had presented her with the truth, documented and cited, and she had chosen to ignore it, to protect her own. He saw the calculation in her eyes. She was betting he had nothing left. She was betting that he was just a smart kid who had found a few holes, and that she could plug them with her authority. He had one card left to play. It was the one he had dreaded, the one he wasn't sure he had the guts to use. He had hoped she would be a judge, that she would see the facts and do the right thing. But she wasn't a judge. She was just another criminal, hiding behind a gavel. Your Honor, Liam said, his voice shaking, but not with fear, with rage. You're right, I'm sorry. Judge Pierce leaned back, a small, triumphant smile playing on her lips. Apology accepted, Mr. Dawson. I'm sorry, Liam continued, that you forced me to do this. I'm sorry that you are so blatantly complicit in this cover-up, that you're willing to sacrifice the Constitution to protect your nephew. The courtroom exploded. Contempt! Strickland roared. Order! Pierce bellowed, her face purple. Bailiff, take Mr. Dawson into custody. He is in contempt of court. The bailiff, a large man named Deputy Peters, moved towards Liam. "Before you do," Liam shouted, holding up his last piece of paper, "ask the judge why she's been having private ex parte communications with the lead detective on my case. Ask her why she met with Officer Kopetsky without attorneys present just 2 days ago." The bailiff stopped. The entire courtroom froze. This was no longer a motion. This was an accusation that could get a judge disbarred. Judge Pierce's blood ran cold. It was true. Kopetsky, panicked about the case, had ambushed her in the private parking garage. She had told him to handle it, and that this administration values loyalty. She had thought it was a private conversation. Liam Dawson looked at her. He hadn't just been in the library. He had been working. "I have a sworn affidavit," Liam said, his voice filling the void, "from a courthouse janitor, Mr. Robert Perry, who was in the garage and overheard your entire illegal conversation. He heard you tell Officer Kopetsky to make sure his story is straight, and that the kid is a nobody. He is in the witness protection program as of this morning, and his affidavit has been filed with the Attorney General's office." Judge Pierce sank back into her chair. She hadn't just been caught. She had been hunted. Liam looked at her, the woman who had called him son and boy. "You asked me if I had anything else, Your Honor. I have the truth. You dismissed my plea, but you can't dismiss this. You're not a judge. You're a co-conspirator." The room was silent. Judge Pierce opened her mouth, but no sound came out. This boy hadn't just known the law. He knew her. He knew her crimes, and he had just read them into the public record. The hard karma wasn't just coming. It was here. The silence in courtroom 3B was no longer a pause. It was a vacuum. It was the deafening quiet that follows a thunderclap, where every person in the room is collectively processing the lightning strike. Judge Annette Pierce's face had collapsed. The mask of judicial authority, of bored impatience, of cold fury, it all evaporated, leaving behind the pale, terrified visage of a woman who had just seen her life end. He knows. It wasn't just that he knew the law. That was a party trick, a jailhouse lawyer who got lucky. He knew her. He knew her nephew. He knew her meeting with Kopecki. He hadn't just been reading Black's Law Dictionary. He had been investigating her. Her eyes darted to ADA Strickland. Strickland looked as if he was about to be physically ill. He was staring at Liam with a new, horrified respect. This wasn't a pro se defendant. This was an executioner. Her eyes moved to the bailiff, Deputy Peters, who was still standing awkwardly between the podium and the bench. He was looking at her, and for the first time in his 20-year career, his expression was not one of deference. It was one of pity. Her gaze finally landed on Liam Dawson. He was still standing, his hand, holding the affidavit, still raised. He wasn't yelling anymore. He was just watching her, waiting. The Attorney General, Pierce finally whispered. The words were dry, sticking in her throat. "Yes, Your Honor," Liam said, his voice formal again. "I filed a formal complaint 2 days ago, along with Mr. Perry's affidavit. I also included the GPS data, the visitor logs, and the evidence of ex parte communication. I believe the State Bar will be receiving their copy this afternoon." He had built a cage, a perfect, inescapable cage made of her own rules. This was the realization. It hit Judge Pierce like a physical blow. It wasn't just that this young man knew the law better than her. It was that he believed in it more than she did. She, Annette Pierce, had spent 2 decades using the law as a hammer to intimidate, to coerce, to process. She saw it as a tool of power. Liam Dawson, A 19-year-old kid with nothing saw the law as a shield, and finding no shield, he had been forced to forge it into a sword. He had studied Gideon Versour, Wainwright, which guarantees a right to counsel, and realized the system had given him a man in Mr. Hodge who just wanted to plead him out. He had studied Brady versus Maryland and Kiles versus Whitley, and realized the prosecution was hiding the very evidence that would free him. He had studied Miranda, and realized his rights had been violated from the first minute. And then he had studied her. "Your Honor," Strickland suddenly blurted out, his voice high and reedy. This is an outrage. The defendant he's threatening the court." He was flailing, looking for any lifeline. He intimidated a witness. This Mr. Perry, this janitor, he probably paid him." It was a mistake. A fatal one. "I paid him," Liam said, a cold, bitter laugh escaping his lips. "I paid him? I have $94 in my bank account, Mr. Strickland. I'm wearing my dead father's suit." He turned his gaze on the prosecutor. "You want to talk about paying people? Let's talk about Brendan Wells. Your lunch meeting wasn't just a welcome, it was to arrange the drop." "That's speculation." "Is it?" Liam said, and he pulled another file from his bag. The bag seemed bottomless. "This is the financial statement I subpoenaed from the evidence room's petty cash fund. Mr. Wells has signed out over $4,000 in disposal fees for destroyed evidence in the last 2 months, evidence that was never scheduled for destruction." He looked at the judge. "He wasn't just skimming, Your Honor. He was running a business. He and Officer Kopetsky. They were stealing high-value items from the locker, electronics, cash, drugs, and replacing them with decoys or destroying the logs. They're the ones who stole those microprocessors. They just needed a patsy to take the fall for the audit that was coming." He pointed at Strickland. "And you helped them. You buried the evidence. You gave them a nobody to pin it on." "Brendan," Pierce whispered. She knew her nephew was shiftless. She knew he had gambling debts. She thought getting him a state job would straighten him out. She hadn't realized. She hadn't wanted to realize. "Your Honor," Liam said, his voice softening, but losing none of its steel. "You dismissed my plea. You called my motion a fantasy. You called me a boy. You told Officer Kopetsky I was a nobody." He gestured to the seal of the state behind her bench. "You sit there, under a sign that says, Justitia Omnibus, justice for all. You've made a mockery of that sign. You've made a mockery of the robe. You knew." He let the words hang. "You knew the case was poison. You saw your nephew's name. You saw the ADA panic. You saw the forged waiver. And you dismissed my plea anyway. You did it to protect him. You did it to protect yourself." Judge Annette Pierce finally, completely understood. This young man wasn't just fighting for his freedom. He was fighting for the law, the full weight of what she had done, not just today, but for 20 years, crashed down on her. The thousands of defendants, the nobodies she had rushed to judgment, the plea deals she had forced, the Mr. Hodges she had enabled, the Liams she had dismissed. It was a tidal wave of karma, and it was drowning her. She looked at her gavel, the symbol of her power. It was now just a piece of wood. She looked at the nameplate on her bench. Honannette Pierce. It looked like a tombstone. Mr. Dawson," she said. Her voice was a cracked ruin. What do you want?" It was the first honest question she had asked all day. Liam Dawson looked at her for a long, painful moment. The courtroom held its breath. "I want," Liam said, his voice trembling with the sheer, crushing weight of his ordeal, "for you to do your job for the first time." He pointed to Strickland. He has engaged in prosecutorial misconduct and conspiracy to obstruct justice. He pointed to the door. Officer Kopetsky has committed perjury, evidence tampering, and fraud. He pointed to the name B. Wells on the log. And he is the one who should be sitting in this chair, charged with felony theft. He then looked at Judge Pierce. And you, Your Honor, you are a material witness and a co-conspirator. You have no right to preside over this case. You have no right to wear that robe. The realization was complete. She had known the law. He knew it better. But more than that, he knew justice. And she didn't. Her career was over. Her reputation was annihilated. Her nephew was going to prison. All because she had dismissed the plea of a nobody. She picked up the gavel. Her hand was shaking so badly she almost dropped it. This court is in recess, she choked out. All parties, to my chambers. Now. The walk from the courtroom to the judge's chambers was the longest 10 feet of Judge Pierce's life. The door, thick and solid oak, clicked shut behind them, muffling the explosion of noise that erupted in the gallery as soon as they left. The chambers were a reflection of the judge, dark wood, expensive leather, and walls covered in plaques and diplomas. It was a room designed to intimidate. Today its owner looked small and frail. The only people in the room were Judge Pierce, a completely broken ADA Strickland, and Liam Dawson. By law, as a pro se defendant, he had to be present for any conversation about his case. Pierce slumped into her high-backed leather chair. She didn't look at either of them. She stared at a framed photo on her desk, her, smiling, at her investiture ceremony 20 years ago. A woman full of promise and principle, a woman she no longer recognized. "Arnold," she said, her voice flat, "tell me everything. And do not lie to me. This room is now a confessional, and Mr. Dawson is our priest." The bizarre analogy hung in the air. Liam just stood by the door, his backpack still on one shoulder, watching. Strickland collapsed into a guest chair as if his legs had given out. The slick, predatory shark was gone. In his place was a terrified middle-aged man who was watching his pension, his career, and his freedom circle the drain. "Annetta, Judge," he began, wringing his hands. It wasn't supposed to be like this." "Stop," she said. "Start with Brendan." Strickland took a gasping breath. "Brendan, your nephew. He's got a problem, a gambling problem. I've known his father for 20 years. Brendan, he came to me about 6 weeks ago. Said he was in deep. He'd been skimming from the evidence locker. Small things at first. Cash from drug busts, a watch. But he got greedy. The microprocessors," Liam said, his voice quiet. He wasn't accusing anymore. He was just stating a fact. "Yes," Strickland whispered. He'd swapped them, a major tech heist case. He'd swapped the real, high-grade processors for cheap knockoffs and sold the real ones. He thought no one would notice until trial. But the defense attorney on that case filed a motion for independent inspection. The audit was moved up. "He was going to be caught," Pierce finished. "He was going to be caught that week," Strickland corrected. "He was panicked. He said he'd tell everyone. He said he'd tell them about what, Arnold?" Pierce pressed. "About the fund," Strickland mumbled. "The discretionary asset forfeiture fund that a few of us in the DA's office have used for expenses. Things." Pierce's eyes widened. This was deeper. Not just a theft, but political corruption. "So Brendan was a threat," Liam said. "He was going to bring you all down with him." Strickland nodded, tears welling in his eyes. "He said he needed a diversion. He needed a replacement. He needed someone to be found with other stolen goods. Something big enough to make the brass happy, to show results. A win to distract from the audit. Officer Kopetsky, Pierce said. Kopetsky was Brendan's guy on the inside, Strickland admitted. He owed Brendan for gambling debts, too. It was their whole operation. Kopetsky would feed Brendan information about high-value seizures, and Brendan would make them disappear. Kopetsky agreed to find a new suspect. A patsy. He said he knew just the kid. A nobody from the projects who was always on the street. Someone plausible. He looked at Liam, his eyes filled with a new, pathetic kind of shame. Liam Dawson, Liam finished for him. Kopetsky planted the other stolen chips on you, the ones from a different theft. He found them in your bag. Brendan logged them. Kopetsky wrote the report. It was supposed to be a simple, clean-sheeted case. A kid with no record, a public defender. He'd plead out. We'd get a conviction, the DA would have a press release, and the audit of the other case would get lost as the paperwork. I was told to make it happen. And you did, Pierce said. You buried the body cam footage. You coached Kopetsky. You met with Brendan. Yes, Strickland whispered. I'm sorry. You're not sorry, Liam said, his voice hard as ice. You're sorry you got caught. He turned to Judge Pierce. And you knew. Kopetsky came to you 2 days ago. Pierce flinched. He was in the garage. He was hysterical. He said, the kid is pro se now. He's asking for subpoenas. He said the kid was asking about B. Wells. He was terrified the kid would find the link. And what did you tell him, Judge? Liam asked. Pierce looked down at her hands. I told him, Mr. Dawson is a nobody. I told him, don't worry, he's a pro se defendant. I will handle it. I told him to make sure his story is straight. It was a full confession, an admission of conspiracy to obstruct justice, right there in her own chambers. Liam Dawson took a small digital audio recorder from his shirt pocket and clicked the stop button. The small click echoed in the opulent room like a gunshot. Strickland looked at the recorder, then at Liam, and he made a sound, a low, animal wail of despair. Judge Pierce just closed her eyes. Of course he had. I have been recording this entire ex parte conversation, Liam said, his voice flat and official. A conversation which I was legally compelled to attend as the defendant, and which, under state two-party consent law, I have a right to record as an active participant. This recording is my new Exhibit A. A full confession from the Assistant District Attorney and a sitting judge. This was the final nail. This was the hard, calmer landing, not with a bang, but with a click. Liam hadn't just studied law. He was a lawyer, in every way that mattered. He had been precise. He had been thorough. He had given them the rope, and he had patiently waited while they braided the noose, put it around their own necks, and jumped. What happens now? Strickland whimpered, all pretense gone. Liam looked at Judge Pierce. He had answered her question. She was still the judge. The power was, technically, still hers. She knew what she had to do. There was only one path, one last, solitary act of actual judging she could perform. She picked up the phone on her desk. She didn't call the Attorney General. She didn't call the Chief of Police. She buzzed her clerk. Patty, please send in Deputy Peters. And call the Chief Judge. Tell him I am surrendering myself into custody. She hung up. She looked at Liam, her eyes, finally, truly, seeing him. Not as a boy, not as a defendant, not as a nobody, but as her replacement, the physical embodiment of the justice she had betrayed. "Mr. Dawson," she said, her voice shaking. Back in the courtroom. "You asked me to do my job. I'm going to. We are going to go back out there. I am going to dismiss your case, and then I am going to resign." The door opened. Deputy Peters stepped in. He saw the recorder in Liam's hand, the crying ADA, the ruined judge. "Judge?" he asked, his voice full of concern. "Deputy," Pierce said, standing up. For the first time, she stood shorter than her bench. "Please escort Mr. Strickland to a holding cell. He is a flight risk. Then I will be next." "Judge, I don't understand." Liam Dawson stepped forward. "You will, Deputy." He turned and led the way, back into the courtroom. Back to finish this. The re-entry to courtroom 3B was like a scene from a dream. The gallery, which had been in a chaotic uproar, fell into a stunned, absolute silence. They saw the order of the procession, and it made no sense. First came Liam Dawson, proceed defendant, walking with a calm, deliberate authority. Then came Deputy Peters, his hand not on his weapon, but on the arm of ADA Arnold Strickland, who was visibly weeping. Last came Judge Annette Pierce. She was no longer the Honourable. She was just a woman in a black robe, her face ashen, her steps heavy. She ascended the steps to the bench one last time. It felt like climbing a mountain. She stood behind her chair, but didn't sit. She gripped the back of it, her knuckles white. The courtroom waited. The reporters in the back row had their phones out, streaming. This was no longer a story. It was history. In the matter of the people versus Liam Dawson, Judge Pierce began, her voice hoarder and unfamiliar to her own ears. This court has been made aware of profound, criminal misconduct. She looked at Liam. He gave a single, sharp nod. "Tell them. The investigation by the arresting officer, Daniel Kopetsky, has been found to be fraudulent," she said, each word a stone in her mouth. The chain of custody for the primary evidence was broken. The suspect's Miranda waiver was falsified. A wave of shock from the gallery. "Furthermore," she continued, her voice gaining a desperate, rushing momentum, "the prosecution, specifically Mr. Arnold Strickland, has been found to have knowingly withheld exculpatory evidence, a clear and direct Brady violation. He did so as part of a conspiracy." She took a deep breath. She had to say his name. A conspiracy with an employee of the evidence room, Brendan Wells, to frame Mr. Dawson for a crime Mr. Wells and Officer Kopetsky themselves committed. The explosion of sound was immediate. People were shouting. Reporters were yelling questions. Judge Pierce grabbed the gavel and slammed it, again and again, not for order, but as a percussion to her own breakdown. "Silence! Silence!" The room quieted, breathless. "The charges against Mr. Liam Dawson are hereby dismissed with extreme prejudice. All records of this arrest are to be sealed and expunged. The court extends its most profound and most inadequate apology to Mr. Dawson for this travesty of justice." She looked at Liam. "Mr. Dawson, you are free to go." But Liam didn't move. This wasn't finished. Judge Pierce knew it. She had one last judgment to render. The karma. "This court," she said, her voice dropping, "now orders the immediate arrest of Officer Daniel Kopetsky for felony perjury, evidence tampering, and criminal conspiracy. This court orders the immediate arrest of Mr. Brendan Wells for felony theft, conspiracy, and obstruction." Strickland, who was now standing next to Deputy Peters, let out a sob. "And," Judge Pierce said, looking straight at the high-definition camera of the news crew she had just noticed in the back. "It is with the full weight of my own misconduct that I confess to ex parte communication with Officer Kopetsky in an attempt to influence this case and obstruct this investigation." She let go of the chair. She stood, unsupported, in the center of her domain. "I, Judge Annette Pierce, am guilty of conspiracy to obstruct justice. Effective immediately, I am recusing myself from this, from all cases, and I am tendering my resignation from the bench." She looked at Deputy Peters. "Deputy, I am surrendering to your custody." She took off the black robe, the one she had worn for 20 years. She folded it neatly and placed it on the bench. Underneath, she was just a woman in a grey pantsuit. She walked down from the bench, not from the private side door, but down the center steps, past the defendant's table, and into the center of the courtroom. She held out her wrists. The sound of the handcuffs clicking shut echoed in the silence. It was a sound of finality, the sound of a life ending, the sound of justice, inverted and terrible, finally being served. Deputy Peters, his face a mask of pained duty, led the former judge and the former prosecutor out of the courtroom. The gallery erupted. It was pandemonium. Cameras flashed. People cheered, cried. In the center of it all, Liam Dawson stood alone at the defendant's table. He slowly, carefully, put his papers, his exhibits, his recorder, back into his old, worn backpack. He zipped it up. Mr. Hodge, the public defender he had fired, approached him, his face awestruck. "Liam, my God, kid, how did you?" Liam looked at the man. "They think 'cause we're poor, we're stupid. They think we don't know the rules, but they're our rules. They're supposed to protect us. I just read them." He slung the backpack over his shoulder. He looked up at the empty bench, at the state seal. Justice for all. He turned and walked out of the courtroom, not as a defendant, not as a victim, but as a conqueror. The nobody had just taken down a judge, a prosecutor, and a corrupt cop, all with a library card and a will of iron. The karma wasn't just hard, it was righteous. The news story didn't just hit the local cycle, it went national. The kid who prosecuted the judge. Courtroom 3B, the takedown. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic for everyone involved. The city's entire justice system was thrown into chaos. Judge Annette Pierce. Her confession in open court made a trial a formality. She pleaded guilty to conspiracy to obstruct justice. Given her cooperation after her confession and her 20 years on the bench, her lawyers argued for probation. The new judge, a stern woman from out of state, made an example of her. She was sentenced to 4 years in a state prison. She was disbarred. Her name was physically chiseled off the wall of the courthouse. The karma was absolute. Her life, as she knew it, was over. Ada Arnold Strickland. Facing a mountain of charges, Strickland sang. He gave the state's investigators everything. The discretionary fund, the other DAs involved, every case he'd ever buried or slow-walked for a favor. He implicated half of the DA's office. His testimony was a bomb that detonated the department. He was disbarred and ultimately received a 10-year sentence, reduced to 5 for his cooperation. Officer Daniel Kopetsky. Kopetsky tried to flee. He was arrested at the Canadian border. Faced with the dash-cam audio, the falsified waiver, and the GPS logs, he pleaded guilty. He was sentenced to 8 years for perjury and his role in the theft ring. His partner, Officer Miller, who had seen nothing, was fired for dereliction of duty. Brendan Wells, the ringleader, received the harshest sentence of all. He was charged with the original microchip theft, the subsequent theft of the other chips, and dozens of other counts of theft from the evidence locker, plus conspiracy. He was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. Judge Pierce's act of nepotism had not only destroyed her own life, but had sealed her nephew's fate. The system. The Strickland confessions led to a full-scale federal investigation. 2 other assistant district attorneys were indicted. The DA himself resigned in disgrace. More importantly, a new Liam's Law was proposed, mandating automatic audits of all Pro Se defendant cases to check for Brady violations. But what about Liam? He was the hero of the hour. He was offered book deals, movie deals, interviews on every major network. He turned them all down. He took the settlement. The city, facing a civil rights lawsuit of catastrophic proportions, settled with Liam Dawson for an undisclosed but substantial sum. It was enough to ensure his family would never have to worry about money again. But Liam didn't buy a fast car. He didn't buy a mansion. He paid off his mother's mortgage. And then he enrolled in college, majoring in pre-law. And after that, he applied to the university's law school. He was accepted on a full scholarship. 8 years later. Courtroom 3B has been remodeled. New paint, new computers, a new state-of-the-art air conditioning system. The uncomfortable wooden benches, however, remained. A new judge sits on the bench. Judge Maria Santos. She is known for her meticulous attention to procedure and her impatience with sloppy prosecutors. Next case, she calls. The People versus Javier Gomez. File 47-112C. A young man, barely 20, is brought out in a jumpsuit. He looks terrified, overwhelmed. He's been charged with possession, and his story is thin. Your Honor, the new young prosecutor says, the state is prepared to offer a deal. 2 years, plead to a lesser felony. The young man, Javier, looks at his public defender. The PD sighs. It's a good deal, kid. You should take it. No, a voice says. The voice is deep, calm, and resonant. It comes from the man sitting next to the public defender, in a suit that is not borrowed. It is tailored. Mr. Gomez will not be taking the deal, the man says, standing up. He pleads not guilty, and we have a motion. The prosecutor rolls his eyes. A motion? On what grounds? The man steps forward. He is tall now, filled out. The nervousness of his youth is gone, replaced by an iron confidence. He opens his briefcase. On the grounds, Mr. Henderson, that your arresting officer's body cam footage has a 4-minute gap, exactly during the time my client claims he was assaulted. On the grounds that you have failed to provide the GPS log for the squad car, and on the grounds that your confidential informant is, in fact, the officer's own cousin, which you failed to disclose. The prosecutor turns pale. How could you? The defense attorney smiles, a thin, sharp smile. My name, he says to the court, is Liam Dawson. I'm with the public defender's office, and I suggest you read my motion. He turns to his client, Javier, and whispers, It's okay. They think we don't read. Let's teach them a lesson. He had gone back into the belly of the beast. He had taken the money the broken system had paid him, and he had used it to forge himself into the weapon the system truly feared, a nobody who knew their rights, and now had the power to enforce them. Judge Pierce, from her minimum security cell, watched the 5 o'clock news that night. They ran a small, human interest story about the new dragon in the public defender's office. She saw his face. Liam Dawson. She turned off the TV. The hard karma hadn't just been a single event. It was a life sentence. She had lost her robe, her name, and her freedom. He had gained his. And now he was using it to save others. The realization, 8 years later, was complete. She hadn't just been beaten by a boy, she had been replaced by a man. And justice, the very thing she had abandoned, was finally being served in her old courtroom by the very nobody she had tried to destroy. In the end, the law is only as strong as the people who believe in it. Judge Pierce and Ada Strickland saw the law as a weapon to control others. Liam Dawson, a kid with nothing but a library card and a sense of right and wrong, proved that it is, and always will be, a shield for the innocent. He didn't just win his case, he cleansed the entire courthouse. He proved that no one, not even a judge, is above the law. And the hard karma? It's that Annette Pierce, in a prison cell, now has to live with the fact that the nobody she dismissed is the very person who now embodies the justice she swore to uphold. What do you think? Was Liam's justice too harsh or not harsh enough? Let me know in the comments below. This story is a reminder to always know your rights. If this story inspired you, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and be sure to subscribe for more true life stories of karma and justice.